Magnets are gate pumps for the ether or vacuum or cosmic energy. What I hope you take away from this whole conference is that vacuum itself is energy. It's potential energy, random. We can cohere this energy with certain devices and systems. There's John Bedini's magnetic motor. This will run virtually forever, and since it will, you can tap this for unlimited, limitless electrical energy. Jorge Manato's magnetic motor, and there's the controversial Parandiv motor. By the way, I recommend that any of you who have requisite skills in electrical magnetic disciplines, you can start to build these, and I recommend that you build them at once. Don't wait. Troy Reed's magnetic motor. Troy Reed powers an automobile, Carr, all around the United States. Just permanent magnets. George Sukup's V-Gate motor. There's a lot of replications on YouTube. Very easy, very accessible design. Don't let anybody tell you there's no such thing as free energy. There is. If you're ingenious enough, industrious enough, and you don't quit, don't listen to naysayers, you can be having free energy. Be free of the tyranny of oil companies, monopolies, and cartels and utilities.
Before I talk about this energy stuff, I want to just tell you to go to the description below, and you're going to find a lot of resources there. You're going to spend hours and days going through it because it's really exciting with all the undiscovered or unknown types of ways of tapping energy. I do have a Patreon account, and there's a link on my channel if you have interest in what I'm doing, and because I don't know if YouTube is going to shut me down, and I don't get paid a whole lot through YouTube anyways, but if you want to do that, it's up to you. Here I am in my messy garage. I'm in the middle of a lot of projects, but I wanted to share this information with you because this is all the stuff I've been experimenting with, tapping into the energy around us, which is called free energy basically, or free electricity. And these are all the first preliminary experiments that I was working with last year, and my knowledge has far exceeded what I am able to have time to do with all my experiments. And it makes me excited because all these little experiments confirmed everything that I've been thinking about. You know, on the internet we are inundated with so much information, misinformation, and a lot of distractions, and so we can never really figure out where the truth is. And there's a lot of the system that we're in, the educational system, all the way down elementary age, all the way up through college. We don't get a lot of information that is very necessary. I mean, some of it's not even necessary to use in the future. A lot of it's busy work. A lot of it's just kind of dancing around these small little insignificant truths or scientific truths that which makes us feel like we're learning something, because it's like, oh yeah, that's true. A little, about electricity. We have a generator, we have magnetism, and all through school, growing up, I never thought I could really understand science and get good grades and all that stuff, but just because of the system. But I figured out that they withhold a lot of information. They withhold the potential of just the energy that's all around us. Basically, we're taught that energy is always somewhere else, and we have to find it somewhere else. And it's there's the analogy of those lighters that have a clicker on it. It's not the flint and steel ones, but it has a clicker, and that clicker is the technology that is not taught, or the potential of that is not taught, because that clicker just has a little hammer that hammers down on some crystals, some quartz crystals, and that impact on the quartz causes an electrical pulse. So they have like a little metal container that the crystal hits on, that is contained in, and it hits on it, and then those wires that are attached to it send out a little signal, and you get a little spark. So, and that's endless. I mean, but there's there's arguments about, it all comes from somewhere else. Like, you eat food, the energy that goes through the food into your system goes through your finger into your muscles to the trigger, and then down through. So there's all this endless tracking down where the energy comes from, and you can never really track it down to a source. That's kind of the idea that we're taught in school. But what I've been discovering is that the energy is all around us. It's in the ground, it's in the air, it's in our bodies, it's in all material and all the electrons. All we have to do is try to figure out how to get those electrons flowing into a direction and then tap into it. And so the energy is in the food, it's also in the body, it's also in your muscles, it's also in your finger. The energy is also in the trigger, it's also in the quartz crystal, it's in everything. So once I started understanding that, I just wanted to do my own experiments with this. And I started out with the idea of, okay, the quartz crystal idea is, there's energy in quartz. This is not a quartz crystal, but it's quartz. Maybe a little amethyst in there. I don't know, but it's maybe it's some other mineral, I don't know. And so I noticed that if I put a copper and aluminum plate on something and then take a multimeter and then just start putting various things in between these plates and then doing a test on it. And when I started doing that, I discovered that I could get power out of almost anything. And I used some cement, because cement is made up of limestone and quartz. So there's a lot of quartz in there. It's like the second most abundant mineral on Earth, which is everywhere. So once this is squished in there between the sandwich of the copper and aluminum, then there's power that you can detect from that. And so from there I went to a pop can, made it a little bigger, made a coil of copper, and then just the aluminum can is for the other metal. So basically you have the negative and the positive side of the battery, and you're pulling energy out of that cement. Promising. 2.36, which is the quartz crystal and all the lime and whatever it is, minerals are in there. And so I did various tests with another one. I heated it up, and the electrons and the detection went up in voltage. I put them in series, and then I put all of these in series, and then I made a LED light up. Come on. Hey, they're on. See that? Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Which was my first successful test, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is stuff that we're not tapping into. And then I thought of glass, because glass is basically quartz. This is melted down quartz, and the challenge is getting the plates to be in good contact. So but I started doing more in series. I got this ice tray. I started doing more tests with that, and then I started working with magnets. These are rare earth magnets that are really strong, and they don't deplete their magnetism over time, so I wanted to get these. And then there's a concept with putting them around this tube in a vacuum, and then there's power that comes from that. I'm still researching this, but there's a lot of people that talk about that. And then I moved on to these little tea light candle things that have an aluminum cup here, or container thing. It's just like the tin can or aluminum can, just smaller. So then I put a little copper plate on top. I stacked all these up in series, about 12 or so, and I made a flashlight out of it, and I have a video about that. Check that out. It's from cement. That is amazing. So I lit up a little LED. So the other challenge is to get those electrons to flow easier and to get the amperage up. I measured a little over 12 volts on about 12 of these stacked up. The amperage is really low. So I started experimenting with a Joule Thief here. And so this is kind of like a transformer up in the power lines. It either increases the amperage on a high voltage. And this is Epsom salts chopped up, and I was doing experiments with that. You can get Rochelle salts and everything, and you can make a really, really good battery that has a lot of power and it lasts a long time. And I was experimenting with this copper pipe. I stuck this into the ground, stuck the multimeter on the rod and into the ground, and then I started just poking around, seeing if I could get it to charge. And I was getting some voltage. I was getting about a half volt, and which is about the same as each of these things. So there's voltage everywhere. I mean there's energy everywhere. It's just a matter of making it more efficient, making the connections really good and solid. And there's another guy that made one out of ferrite rod, graphite or something like that. He sandwiched it in between some rare earth magnets, increases the voltage, I believe, and also holds it together and keeping that bond together. And then he put some capacitors in between, and so those capacitors actually charge up from the voltage that is within the crystals. So that's one I want to get to. I want to get to what that guy's doing, and I also want to just do some really awesome experiments to get people started immediately. But there's so much information out there, and a lot of potential that we're not tapping into because they withhold a lot of this information. Because if we figured out how to generate power, or I mean not generate power, but to tap into the power that's all around us, then we wouldn't need power lines, we didn't need a lot of things. They're not going to teach the potential of this in schools or colleges or anything. So, because the story of Nikola Tesla when he ran into JP Morgan or whatever, and they didn't want to do what Tesla was trying to do, make wireless power for everybody for free, because you couldn't put a meter on it and you can't charge people and you can't control people basically. So and I encourage you to look into Nikola Tesla, because that's also, his research has also been kind of pushed under the rug, and there's a lot of potential there that we are not tapping ourselves. So basically we can't rely on the big corporations or big schools or system to come out with technology that we could use that to become actually independent energy wise, because energy is everything. Energy is going to be in all aspects of our lives will become free if we could produce energy on our own, and we won't need to rely on batteries that run out or corrode over time, or we don't have to rely on petrochemicals for powering our cars, and then that's getting into like water powered cars and all this stuff. And there's a lot of naysayers out there, people trying to discourage us, but just stay vigilant and have discernment and experiment on your own. One good investment that you can get is just a multimeter, detects amperage and volts and anything, and then just get a copper and aluminum plate, and then just start experimenting on your own, and you'll learn more within an hour of just doing that than you would in your whole high school career or elementary school or college, because they don't teach the potential of this. But we see the technology that is somewhat on a minuscule level is being utilized, but they don't let us know about the potential of it. The other idea is solar panels run on that same exact idea as I was telling you about. And so there's energy in the sun that comes from the sun. It activates the electrons. They flow through the two metal plates, which are basically the whatever they use. I don't know if they use aluminum or whatever, but they have a couple metal things sandwiched in, and so they just have a bunch of them going through to capture that energy that's coming through the sun, from the sun and through the air. So that's just from the sun, and we're not talking about just the electrical energy that's in the air. So these are just like, I'm just scraping the surface off this, and I get so many comments from these videos that I make about free energy and free electricity. A lot of people distracting, discouraging. Let me just go in there and read a couple of them. Here's some distraction techniques that they use. So they say, this is wrong, this is not possible, it's not conventional, it doesn't fit our laws of physics or laws of whatever it is. They try to discredit, they disrupt, they try to cause distrust, they deceive, delay, deny, degrade, detour, dissuade. Sometimes these trolls that make these comments, they have multiple aliases, so they comment all the time on multiple profiles. Say that they mimic a real person, but they're all the same person, you know, and they sometimes befriend you, act like they're your friend, and then they try to lead you off on some other path that is not really informational at all. So these distraction techniques are all to distract us from how simple it is. You get simple concepts of science, technology, energy that they make you think that you've got to have a Nobel Peace Prize to know anything, or you got to have a doctorate, or you got to have some kind of whatever to know something, and you got to know all these formulas and you got to know all these things, but you don't have to know any of that stuff. You just experiment on your own like a kid, like experimenting with whatever you got, and you'll learn way more than you would ever learn in the school system. So there's a lot of little things that they do. They use law in the title of, you know, the law of whatever it is to make you think that it's set and that it can't be questioned, and no other way can happen, no other way can work. But the laws of physics are always broken, and we're always discovering new things. You know, they make us think that everything's been discovered, nothing new's coming out, and all the smart people know what's going on, and they know that, you know, nothing else is possible. There's a lot of decoys out there. They try to make you think that, you know, this is beyond your knowledge, beyond your understanding. There's no way you'll be able to understand it. They use a lot of jargon that sounds smart. They use a lot of vague graphs about certain things, but never give you the key information on certain things. This describes the school system a lot. And then when it becomes confusing, they simply tell you or imply that you just don't understand, and you can't grasp what's going on, and you're not smart enough. That's usually the technique. And so if you get overwhelmed by the chaos of confusing information, then you're just not smart enough to grasp it. That's usually the thing that happens. And so that describes the school system, that describes any, you know, smart person that is presenting a really complicated graph of science or something like that. And it's not that complicated. Anybody can understand it, you know, and you could start doing these experiments on your own. And once you start figuring that out, then you're like, the world opens up to you as something really exciting, because you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much around here that I never knew was possible. There's energy everywhere, and we can tap into it with just household items that we've got laying around, or cheap things that we could buy from the store. It doesn't have to be this huge complicated mess of things. And that's why I've been discovering things, is because I know that's the case, that there are things to discover and that we could understand them. So the video that I showed at the beginning is just a guy presenting these simple concepts, and these are videos that I've run into before. Basically, I've been doing research on electricity, magnetism, and basically I've run into the exact same people, the same names as he was presenting. So I knew this guy was like, I'm like, okay, John Bedini, I've already been researching him. That's what got me onto the tapping into crystals and the quartz and just the potential power there, making my own batteries. And so John Bedini was one that I knew was honest. And so he was pointing out John Bedini. He was talking about some other ones and some other things I was kind of on the track of. And so I'm like, okay, cool. This guy, he's talking about the stuff that we've been missing in our lives. So there's a lot of potential that we can just do right now. Like, we don't have to wait for somebody to invent it. We don't have to wait for a corporation to come out with it. We can do it on our own. And there's so many comments that I get off of some other videos that just try to discourage and be like, you don't know what you're talking about. You know, this is a joke. All you're do is rambling on, and you don't know anything. You don't understand the laws of thermodynamics and all this stuff. It's like, you know what? Just the little experiments that I've done have kind of blown that wide open. As it's like, I'm not listening to that at all. So it's a matter of just doing your own experiments based off of your own discernment of what's true, you know, and if it's within your grasp. One of the things that I have in mind is, does it connect with the universe? Does it connect with what God does with the galaxies, the planets, the suns? They're all magnetism within a vacuum that are spinning around each other, producing power endlessly. This is what God uses in his universe. Like, he uses these same concepts and these vortexes of energy, of positive, negative flow of energy that keep flowing forever. So all we have to do is just tap into that energy and for our use, and it keeps coming forever. We don't have to tap into the grid system with power lines, with anything else. Even with wind or solar, we can tap into so many different things. And the challenge is to try to figure out what path you want to take to do it. So you see multiple ways of people that are doing it, because energy is everywhere, and there's just, you could find an inventive way of knowing how to tap into that. John Bedini did it one way, and all of these other people have done it in many different ways. And this is related to what they've been starting to discover. You know, way back in history, you know, we discovered that there are some historical inventions and discoveries that kind of been just lost in the mess when they're actually more advanced than what we know now. And it may sound strange to hear, but even you know, the story of the Benjamin Franklin and the kite and the key on the kite and him standing on the ground. You know, I thought at first, oh, he's just experimenting with lightning, and he's, you know, he's getting dangerous with it. But now I think that I'm understanding what he was doing is he was tapping into the energy that's all around, the static electricity, and it would build up. Like, the kite was like an antenna. It was collecting the electricity in the air, and the air and the electricity would go through into the key and charge it up. And he was standing as if he was a ground. And so there's the negative part of it. So he was connected to the ground. And the key in the middle was actually charging up with the electricity. And so now advanced ideas from that is you could put up an antenna up in the air and put it into the ground, and you could start getting power, like I was talking about with the copper pole that I stuck into the ground. And so if you could get more elaborate with that and get like more antenna into the air and more into the ground, you could even use a tree, because the tree is like up there getting antenna, like an antenna, and it's into the ground. Stick a nail in it, stick the wire out, you know, into the ground. I was I've yet to experiment with that, but there's ideas like this. So in the description below, I want you to go to that because I have a collection of all of this research and all of these links that I've been collecting, and it's a lot, and there's a lot of gold there. And I want to emphasize that because this is like mining for gold, because when we're sifting through all the chaos, the misinformation, the dirt, the crap, and then you find a nugget of gold and you're like, ooh, this is the truth. This is one I can go off of. I could understand this. And so I collected a lot of this stuff. And so you can take these links and this information and go to it, and you could spend years researching this stuff. And it's exciting because you're like, oh my gosh, I never thought of that, and I could do that at home. And basically it's just years and years of stuff, of links and information of nuggets of gold. So go down the description below. You'll find a lot of resources if you're interested in this stuff. And so I'm trying to catch up. My experiments and skills are trying to catch up with what my brain is thinking. So I'm going to do a lot more videos on this, and I want to find a way to create energy simply with household stuff that we could just do on our own, that we can understand, and we can just do it right immediately. So I'm trying to figure that out, and maybe you'll discover your own. But go down the description. I promise you there's going to be so much good stuff there. You're going to spend years and hours, weeks on it. So thank you for your support. I do have a Patreon thing for donations. I don't know if this video is going to get demonetized, or even my channel will, because they don't like this information getting out. But who knows if it'll go shut down. So I do have a Patreon link if you desire to do that. But I'm going to keep coming out with this information. I'm going to keep looking. So just stay tuned for all of that.